It was a warm summer morning when Abigail Williams, a dedicated local nurse, was starting her day as usual. She had been living in a small apartment on the edge of town, in a quiet neighborhood, for the past few years. It wasn't much, but it was home. The apartment was cozy, with a small kitchen, a comfortable couch, and a small table where she kept her books and medical notes. Life was calm, but Abigail's heart longed for more. She wanted to help more animals, especially stray cats that roamed the streets of her neighborhood. Abigail had always loved animals. As a child, she would rescue injured birds, nurse them back to health, and release them into the wild. Now as an adult, with a full-time job at the local hospital, she didn't have the same amount of time as she did when she was younger. But her love for animals never wavered. Every morning, before her shift started, she would go out into the small yard of her apartment building, carrying a bag of cat food to feed the stray cats that had made their home in the neighborhood. They would wait for her near the bushes and alleyways, eyes wide, knowing she would be the one to bring them food. One particular black cat had caught Abigail's heart. She had named her Luna. Luna was a quiet cat, always on the move, but she had this special spark in her eyes. Luna wasn't like the other stray cats. She had a soft, silky coat and a calm demeanor. A couple of months ago, Abigail had noticed something different about Luna. The cat had grown a little rounder, and Abigail guessed she was expecting kittens. Abigail was thrilled at the thought, but she also worried for Luna. The streets were no place for a pregnant cat, and Abigail didn't have the means to take her in. Every morning, Abigail would check on Luna, making sure she was well fed, hoping that Luna would somehow find a safe place to give birth. But every time she visited, Luna would only be lying under the bushes, pacing the ground restlessly, looking for food, but never lingering in one place for too long. The bond between the two women grew, and soon, Luna's pregnancy became a daily concern for Abigail. She had heard stories of stray cats being abandoned by their owners, left to fend for themselves in the harsh streets. The idea of Luna having her kittens in such an unsafe environment bothered Abigail deeply, and she often wished she could provide a better life for Luna and her unborn kittens. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. One day, after finishing her night shift at the hospital, Abigail returned home, exhausted but hopeful for another quiet evening. As she stepped into the apartment, she grabbed a bag of cat food and made her way outside to check on the strays. It was the usual routine, but when she reached the corner of the yard, she noticed something strange. Luna was nowhere to be found. Her heart skipped a beat. Luna was always there, waiting for her. She called out her name softly, but there was no response. Panic started to rise in Abigail's chest. She searched under the bushes, behind the fence, and even in the alleyway where Luna sometimes wandered. But Luna was gone. The anxiety in Abigail's chest grew stronger as she realized the worst. Luna had disappeared, and she had no idea where she could be. With a sigh of frustration, Abigail went back inside, hoping for some sign that Luna would return. Hours passed, and the sun began to set. She sat at her small table, thinking of her lost companion. She wondered where Luna could have gone and why she wasn't around anymore. Just when Abigail had almost given up hope, she heard a faint sound from outside. It was a quiet mewing, barely audible over the sounds of traffic. But it was unmistakable. It was Luna. Abigail rushed out of the apartment and followed the sound of the faint cries. The mewing became louder as she approached the small empty lot next to her apartment complex. She pushed through the tall grass and walked deeper into the field, calling Luna's name. When she reached the edge of the lot, she froze. There, in the middle of the tall grass, Luna was struggling. A massive snake, easily 6 feet long, had wrapped itself around Luna's body, tightening its grip. Luna's frantic attempts to escape were in vain. The snake's coils squeezed tighter with every breath Luna took. Abigail's heart raced as she took in the horrifying sight before her. "Luna!" Abigail cried out, rushing forward. She wanted to help, to save the cat, but her heart sank as she saw the snake's powerful grip. Luna's struggles were weakening. The poor cat's body was trapped, and she was running out of time. Abigail knelt next to Luna, but there was nothing she could do. The snake's hold was too strong, and every time she tried to pry the coils away, The snake simply tightened its grip, hissing loudly in warning. Panic and helplessness surged through Abigail as she realized she couldn't save Luna on her own. Tears welled up in Abigail's eyes as she realized that, no matter what she did, Luna and her unborn kittens were not going to make it. The scene felt surreal. How could something so tragic be happening right in front of her? Her hands trembled as she tried to pull Luna free. But the snake was relentless. It was at that moment, in the middle of the chaos, that Abigail heard a strange noise, a bark. It was distant at first, but as the sound grew louder, Abigail's head snapped up. Who was out there? Who could help her now? Suddenly, a large, golden retriever appeared from behind a nearby bush. It was Charlie, the dog who belonged to her elderly neighbor, Harold. Charlie had always been a well-behaved dog, loyal to his owner, but never one to venture far from the house. But today, something was different. Charlie barked again, running toward Abigail with determination in his eyes. "Charlie, what are you doing here?" Abigail called out, confused but relieved to see the dog. Charlie ignored her and went straight for the snake, growling low in his throat. The snake hissed in response, but Charlie wasn't afraid. With a snap of his powerful jaws, Charlie lunged at the snake, biting down on its coils. The snake jerked violently, releasing its grip on Luna. Abigail wasted no time. She pulled Luna from the snake's now loosened hold and cradled her in her arms, tears streaming down her face. Charlie's growls filled the air as he fought off the snake, preventing it from attacking again. With a final yank, Charlie broke the snake's hold and sent it slithering away into the grass, disappearing into the woods. Abigail sat there, breathless, with Luna in her arms, her body trembling from the adrenaline and shock of the moment. "Thank you, Charlie," Abigail whispered through her tears, hugging the dog tightly. Charlie barked, wagging his tail in approval, as if he knew he had just saved Luna's life. But there was still one thing left to do. Luna was weak, her body limp in Abigail's arms, but she was alive, and that was all that mattered. With Charlie leading the way, Abigail carried Luna back to her apartment, where she would do everything she could to nurse her back to health and protect her until her kittens arrived. As they entered the apartment, Abigail knew this was the beginning of a new chapter, and with Charlie by her side, she felt confident that she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Abigail carefully placed Luna on a soft towel in the corner of her living room. The apartment, which had always felt too small for all her dreams, now felt like a sanctuary for the injured cat and her unborn kittens. She moved quickly, checking Luna's body for any signs of injury. The snake had squeezed her tight, but thankfully, there were no deep puncture wounds, only bruises and a few scratches from the struggle. Luna was exhausted, her breathing shallow and labored. Charlie, who had followed Abigail inside, sat near Luna, his eyes attentive, watching over her like a guardian. Abigail couldn't help but smile through her tears at the loyalty in Charlie's eyes. He had been more than just a rescue. He had been a hero. "Thank you, Charlie," Abigail whispered again, her voice thick with gratitude. The dog's tail wagged in response, his eyes soft and gentle. He seemed to understand that his job wasn't quite done yet. Abigail ran to the small kitchen, gathering supplies for Luna. She grabbed a bowl of fresh water and a can of cat food she had left in the pantry. When she returned to the living room, she carefully set the water bowl next to Luna, who blinked up at her weakly, but did not move. The black cat was too drained to eat, but Abigail didn't want to push her. Instead, she focused on getting some warmth into her. Wrapping Luna in a soft blanket, she gently stroked the cat's fur, trying to calm her. The room was quiet, save for the occasional shuffle of Charlie's paws as he paced back and forth, keeping a watchful eye on his new companions. Abigail sat down beside Luna, her fingers still gently caressing the cat's fur. "You're safe now," she whispered softly. "You're going to be okay." It wasn't long before the exhaustion of the day began to take its toll on Abigail. The adrenaline from the rescue had worn off, and now, all she wanted was to rest. But she couldn't. Not until Luna was stable. She kept vigil by the cat's side, only rising occasionally to check on her food and water. By the time the evening sun began to dip beneath the horizon, Luna's breathing had steadied. She still wasn't eating, but there was a glimmer of life in her eyes, a hint of her usual spirit. Abigail let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you," she whispered again, this time to the quiet room. Charlie, sensing that his work was done for now, lay down beside Luna, resting his head on his paws. His loyalty was unwavering. As the night grew darker, Abigail remained by Luna's side. She couldn't afford to leave the cat alone, not after everything that had happened. She spent the night listening to the sound of Luna's soft purrs and Charlie's gentle breathing, knowing that, at least for now, they were safe. The next morning, Abigail woke up to the smell of fresh coffee. She glanced at the clock. It was early, but she couldn't sleep any longer. She had spent most of the night awake, ensuring Luna was comfortable. She stood up and stretched, then went to check on Luna. To her surprise, Luna was sitting up, licking her paws with slow, deliberate movements. Her eyes were bright, and she looked less weary than she had the night before. Abigail's heart swelled with happiness. "You're looking better," she said softly, crouching down to be at eye level with Luna. The cat blinked at her, then gave a soft mew, a sound that made Abigail's heart skip a beat. Luna was alive, and it seemed like she was recovering. Abigail had a feeling that Luna's recovery would take time, but she was willing to be patient. She had her work cut out for her, but she was determined to see Luna through this, no matter what. As she prepared some breakfast for herself, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change. Charlie, as if sensing her thoughts, padded over to the kitchen and sat by her feet. He looked up at her with those intelligent eyes, as if silently asking if he could be of further assistance. Abigail smiled at the dog, and for a moment, she felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the heat of the morning sun streaming through the windows. "You've already done enough, Charlie," she said softly, reaching down to pat him on the head. "But I'll always be grateful for you." Later that morning, Abigail had just finished cleaning up when a knock came at her door. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. When she saw who was standing there, her heart gave a jolt. Standing in front of her was Kevin, her elderly neighbor. He looked just as he always did, stoic and serious. But there was something different in his eyes today. He had Charlie with him, of course, who was wagging his tail excitedly as usual. Kevin was holding a small bag of groceries in his hand. "Good morning, Miss Williams," Kevin greeted, his voice as gruff as ever. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Abigail was surprised by the visit, but quickly recovered. "No, of course not. What brings you here, Kevin?" Kevin stepped forward, looking past Abigail and into the apartment. His eyes scanned the space, finally resting on Luna, who was curled up in the corner on a cushion. The cat's green eyes looked back at him, and for a moment, there was a silent understanding between them. Kevin's expression softened. "I saw you out there yesterday," Kevin said quietly, "and I noticed something was wrong. I couldn't help but think that I should check on you today, just in case." Abigail smiled, feeling touched by his concern. She had never been able to get close to Kevin before, but somehow, it felt different today. She gestured for him to come in. "Thank you for checking in," she said warmly. "I really appreciate it. Luna is doing much better today, thanks to Charlie." Kevin nodded, but didn't say much at first. He put the bag of groceries down on the kitchen counter and walked over to Luna. He squatted beside her, his hands moving gently over her back. "I've been around a long time," Kevin said softly. "I know a thing or two about animals. It looks like this little one has been through quite an ordeal." Abigail watched him carefully. There was something in Kevin's demeanor that suggested he understood loss more than most. Perhaps it was his quiet strength, or the way his eyes softened when he spoke to Luna. Kevin sighed and looked up at Abigail. "You're doing a good job, taking care of these animals. I've seen you here every day, feeding the strays. It's not something you see much anymore. People don't care as much as they used to." Abigail smiled again, but this time, there was a sadness behind her eyes. "I've always loved animals. It just feels right to help them when I can." Kevin nodded, his face serious. "Well, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I've lived a full life, and I've seen my fair share of struggles. You're not alone in this." His words touched Abigail deeply. She had always felt a certain distance between herself and Kevin. But today, it was as if they had found a common understanding. They were both caring for something they loved, and that bond, however small, meant more than words could express. As Kevin left the apartment later that day, Abigail stood in the doorway, watching him walk down the hallway. She felt a sense of peace that had been missing for a long time. Luna was recovering. Kevin had shown unexpected kindness, and Charlie was still by her side. The days passed slowly, and Abigail's routine became centered around Luna and her growing family. Kevin's unexpected visit had shifted something inside of her. She no longer felt as isolated. She knew that the bond between them was still new, but it felt real, and it was enough to give her the strength to keep moving forward. Luna's recovery had been slow but steady. She had started to eat again, her small, bright eyes gleaming with life. The black cat had been a quiet companion to Abigail, lying by her side as she worked on her art projects or read books in her small living room. But something was shifting in the air. Abigail could sense it, and so could Charlie, the dog, who had been loyal to Luna from the moment he met her, would often lay beside her, his eyes protective. One morning, as the sun rose, Abigail noticed that Luna was acting strangely. The cat, who had been lying peacefully, was now pacing restlessly. Her body seemed tense, and her eyes were wide. Abigail's heart skipped a beat. She knew what this meant. "Luna, are you okay?" Abigail whispered, crouching beside the cat. Luna let out a soft meow, almost like a plea, and Abigail immediately understood. It was time. She rushed to prepare the corner of her living room, pulling out blankets and pillows. She had done some research online, knowing that Luna would need a safe, quiet space for her labor. As Abigail worked, she kept a close eye on Luna, making sure she was comfortable. Luna seemed calm now, but Abigail could tell she was nervous. At that moment, Kevin knocked on the door. He had become a familiar face in her life, offering his support whenever she needed it. Abigail opened the door to find him standing there, looking down at Charlie, who wagged his tail excitedly. "Morning, Miss Williams," Kevin said, tipping his hat. "Hi, Kevin," Abigail greeted with a warm smile. "You came just in time. Luna's about to give birth." Kevin nodded with understanding, his eyes softening as he entered the apartment. He had been to many births in his life, both human and animal, but there was something about Luna's situation that moved him. He followed Abigail to the living room, where Luna had found her corner. The cat was resting now, breathing heavily. Kevin gave her a reassuring look. "She'll be fine," Kevin said, his voice steady. "Animals are tougher than we think." Abigail nodded, grateful for his calm presence. As the morning went on, Luna's contractions grew stronger. Abigail kept watch, offering quiet encouragement as she had seen in her research. Kevin sat in the corner, Charlie resting by his feet, his calm eyes flicking between Luna and Abigail. Finally, after what felt like hours, Luna gave one last push, and the first kitten was born. It was small but strong, a tiny ball of fur with a soft mew. Abigail gently cleaned it and placed it beside Luna, who nuzzled it affectionately. The second kitten followed shortly after, then the third, and finally, the fourth. They were all healthy, their tiny bodies squirming as they instinctively sought out their mother's warmth. Abigail and Kevin watched in awe as Luna curled around her kittens, purring softly. Abigail felt a rush of relief and joy. The family she had once felt so disconnected from, Luna, Charlie, and now these new little lives, had filled her heart in a way she had never expected. And Kevin, with his quiet strength, had become an important part of this journey. As the day ended, Kevin looked down at Luna and her kittens. "They'll be all right," he said, his voice full of a quiet pride. "You did good, Miss Williams. You and Luna both." Abigail smiled, her eyes teary with emotion. "Thank you, Kevin, for everything." Kevin gave a small smile, something warmer than usual. "Don't mention it. We're all family now, aren't we?" Abigail nodded, feeling that same warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly at home, surrounded by her animals and the unlikely bond she had formed with her neighbor, Charlie, who had been lying by her feet the whole time, wagged his tail, as if agreeing. And in that moment, Abigail realized that, no matter what the future held, she was not alone. She had found her place in the world, surrounded by those who mattered, both the living and the animal companions that had come into her life when she needed them most. The family she had always dreamed of, the one she thought she would never have, had come together in a way she could never have expected. As she looked at the peaceful scene in front of her, Luna nestled among her kittens, Charlie lying nearby, and Kevin standing quietly by her side, Abigail knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, understanding, and the strength that comes from unexpected friendships. And with that, she let out a contented sigh, knowing that, for the first time in her life, she truly belonged. The end.